On a rainy autumn morning in a small town in Ohio, an elderly woman named Eleanor sat by her window, gazing out at the droplets cascading down the glass. Approaching 80, her eyes still sparkled with the curiosity of a young girl. The soft whistle of her kettle filled the kitchen when the doorbell rang. Standing at the door was a tall young man named Jake, carrying a large box on his shoulder. At 28, he was accustomed to knocking on countless doors each day, delivering packages to make ends meet. When Eleanor opened the door, their eyes met, and Jake's warm smile ignited a flutter in her heart that she hadn't felt in years. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, his voice carrying a hint of nervousness. "Come in, dear," Eleanor replied, her voice trembling slightly with surprise. "I have a delivery for you, ma'am," Jake said, glancing around the cozy living room. "But I must say, your home looks incredibly peaceful." It was a simple statement, yet it struck a chord in Eleanor's heart. It had been a long time since anyone had remarked on the tranquility of her home. After accepting the box, Jake prepared to leave, but Eleanor found herself saying, "Would you like to stay for some tea, dear?" "I'd love to, but I'm a bit pressed for time." "However, I could manage a quick cup," Jake replied, his eyes lighting up with a shy smile. They settled at the small kitchen table, adorned with a delicate lace tablecloth. Two slender glasses fogged up as Eleanor poured the steaming tea. As she looked into Jake's eyes, memories of her own youth flooded back. Jake, meanwhile, found himself captivated by the gentle lines of Eleanor's hands, which had borne the weight of life yet remained delicate. The aroma of the tea created an invisible bridge between them, and before long, Jake was sharing stories of his life, his weariness, and his dreams. Eleanor listened intently, feeling a spark of vitality that had long been absent from her life. Time slipped away unnoticed. When Jake finally glanced at his watch, he realized he was late. He stood up hurriedly but paused before leaving. "Ma'am, I found peace here with you," he said softly. A blush crept onto Eleanor's cheeks, her heart racing like that of a young girl. After he left, a profound silence enveloped the house, but within Eleanor's spirit, a new story began to take root. She sensed that her life was about to change in ways she never expected. The next morning, the doorbell rang again. It was Jake, this time without any pretense or delivery. He had come simply to see her, to share another cup of tea. Their story began in that moment, woven together by the warmth of a shared drink and the connection of two seemingly lonely souls. Jake had woken early, a strange mix of excitement and calm swirling within him. He usually didn't visit the same customer 2 days in a row, but Eleanor's tea, the scent of her kitchen, and the warmth of her presence lingered in his thoughts. He needed an excuse to knock on her door again. As he approached her house, he took a deep breath, clutching a small cake box in his hand, adorned with a cheap card that read "Thank you." He rang the bell, and when Eleanor opened the door, her eyes widened in surprise, but her smile was radiant. "Jake, my dear. What a lovely surprise. I wanted to thank you for the tea yesterday." "It was truly special," she said, her voice brightening the dreary day. Jake felt a rush of warmth at her words. "I just wanted to bring you this," he said, holding out the cake box. "I thought it would be a nice treat to enjoy with our tea." Eleanor felt a twinge of embarrassment at being called ma'am. It warmed her heart, yet it also reminded her of the years that had passed. She couldn't quite understand why it affected her so deeply. Perhaps it was the realization that the term made her feel older than she wanted to admit. They stepped inside, and Jake opened the box, revealing the cake. He sliced it into 2 generous pieces. This time, there was coffee as well, served in Eleanor's vintage silver-rimmed cups. The kitchen filled with the rich aroma, blending perfectly with the sweet scent of the cake. The ticking of the clock on the wall filled the cozy kitchen as Emma stirred her coffee, glancing across the table at Mark. "I haven't shared a cup of coffee with anyone in ages," she said, her voice soft, almost reflective. Mark smiled, a hint of warmth in his eyes. At first, there was a comfortable silence between them, but soon he began to share stories from his childhood. He spoke of losing his father at a young age, how his mother worked tirelessly at the local market to make ends meet, and how he had to grow up quickly. Emma listened intently, her gaze occasionally drifting away as memories of her own son surfaced, her boy who had gone overseas years ago, never to return, leaving behind only silence. Sometimes, Mark said quietly, you meet someone for just 5 minutes, but they stay with you forever. Emma felt a pang in her heart at his words, sensing an unspoken connection between them. From that day on, Mark began to stop by every morning. Sometimes he would come up with excuses, I brought a package, or the company is running a new promotion. But Emma knew the truth, she could feel it in her bones. Each visit chipped away at the silence that had settled in her home, slowly melting the loneliness that had taken root in her heart. One day, Mark mustered the courage to ask, have you ever been in love? Emma hesitated, unsure of how to respond. She had loved deeply in her youth, but life had taken her down a different path, marriage, raising children, and the passage of time had dulled those memories. I did, she finally admitted. But that was a long time ago. Love felt different back then. You waited, you wrote letters, you cherished every moment. Now, it seems everyone talks, but no one truly feels. Mark looked deeply into her eyes. But you still feel it, he said. I can see it in your eyes. Emma felt a flush of embarrassment and turned her head away, but Mark reached out, gently taking her hand in his. For a brief moment, there was an unspoken bond between them, a connection that seemed to transcend time. The next day, when Mark arrived, Emma had gathered her hair into a neat bun and wore a simple yet elegant dress. Soft music played in the background, and a delicate scent of her favorite perfume lingered in the air. Everything felt different. That day, they shared a meal together for the first time, lentil soup, rice, and yogurt. To Mark, it felt like a feast, a celebration of their growing friendship. After lunch, Emma pulled out an old photo album, flipping through the pages filled with memories. She showed Mark a black and white photograph of herself as a young woman, her gaze wistful and thoughtful. Mark studied the picture, his heart racing. This woman is sitting right in front of me, but my heart races differently when I look at her, he said softly. Emma smiled faintly, but a shadow of doubt crossed her face. But that woman has aged, she replied. Mark shook his head. The heart knows no age, Emma. That night, as Emma lay in bed, her heart raced with a mix of excitement and guilt. She felt a flutter of emotions she hadn't experienced in years, questioning whether it was appropriate at her age. But when she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman who looked alive for the first time in ages, her cheeks flushed with color. The following morning, however, the doorbell didn't ring. Mark didn't come. Emma waited all day, glancing at the clock, peering out the window, and even checking her phone for messages that never came. The next day passed in a similar fashion, and by the third day, she felt a growing sense of despair. When the doorbell finally rang, she rushed to answer it, only to find a stranger standing there. Disappointment washed over her. Days turned into a week, and just as Emma began to accept that perhaps this was a fleeting moment in her life, the doorbell rang again. She opened the door to find Mark standing there, looking weary but filled with something deeper. I'm so sorry, he said, his voice heavy with regret. My mother fell ill, and I had to go back to my hometown. Emma's heart ached as she looked into his eyes, unable to hide her tears. I was worried, she whispered. Mark stepped inside, holding a small pouch in his hand. He pulled out an old-fashioned handkerchief, embroidered with the letter E. My grandmother always said, if you can make a woman happy, that's enough. Emma took the handkerchief, her heart trembling at the gesture. In that moment, everything felt different, as if the world outside had faded away, leaving just the two of them, bound by unspoken words and shared experiences. The evening passed in a comfortable silence, filled with the warmth of shared tea and lingering glances. As the night drew to a close, Mark stood at the door, a hint of uncertainty in his eyes. Should I come back tomorrow? He asked, his voice soft. Emma paused, a smile breaking through her initial hesitation. Yes, Mark. Come, but this time, no excuses. The next morning, at 9 o'clock, Emma stepped into her kitchen, feeling an unusual energy in the air. She opened the curtains wide, letting the sunlight flood in, illuminating the space with a golden glow. She set the table, brewed a fresh pot of tea, and arranged her favorite cups, but as the hours ticked by, her anticipation turned into anxiety. 10 o'clock came and went, then 11, and still no sign of Mark. A small knot of worry tightened in her chest. Had something happened to him? Was his absence a sign that his visits were merely a fleeting whim? Just as doubt began to creep in, the doorbell rang. Emma rushed to the door, her heart racing, only to find Mark standing there with a small bag in hand and a sheepish smile on his face. I'm sorry I'm late, but I have no excuse this time, he said, stepping inside. When their eyes met, everything felt right again. This time, Mark seemed to have come not just for tea, but to stay. They spent the day reading books together and watching classic films. Emma shared stories about the old movies she loved, and Mark listened intently, captivated by her enthusiasm. With every word, he found himself more enchanted by her spirit. The young woman inside Emma was awakening once more, but alongside that excitement was a tinge of fear. What would the neighbors think? What would her family say if they knew? Sometimes, when she looked in the mirror, she couldn't help but question her choices. That evening, as Mark prepared to leave, he paused at the door. Emma, I need to ask you something. She looked away, feeling a rush of vulnerability. Ask me. I think about you more each day. I find peace when I'm with you. Is that wrong? Emma hesitated. I don't know, Mark. What is right? What is wrong? I can't even name what we have. Mark stepped closer, his gaze steady. I've named it already, he said softly. The word hung in the air, echoing between them. Emma's eyes glistened with unshed tears. At this age, she whispered. Age doesn't count when it comes to the heart, he replied. I feel at home with you. That's real. Emma turned her head, trying to suppress the tears that threatened to spill. But Mark reached for her hand, gently holding it. Then, he leaned in and placed a soft kiss on her forehead, slow, tender, and filled with unspoken promises. That night, Emma lay awake, her heart racing. She looked in the mirror, brushed her hair, and was transported back to her youth, remembering how she had once waited for someone by the window, only to have them leave. But Mark felt different. The next day, he returned, this time with 2 tickets in hand. How about we go to the theater, he suggested, his eyes sparkling with excitement. Emma was taken aback, she hadn't been out like this in years. But Mark's earnestness was hard to resist. That evening, they found themselves in a small cultural center, watching a classic love story unfold on stage. As they sat side by side, Mark's hand found its way to rest on Emma's. For a moment, she felt a rush of uncertainty, but then she relaxed into his touch. In the dimly lit theater, 2 lonely souls connected in a way that felt both exhilarating and comforting. In the days that followed, their bond deepened. Emma began cooking meals for Mark, while he brought groceries and helped tidy up her home. They were creating a life together, piece by piece. One afternoon, while rummaging through a closet, they stumbled upon an old music box. Emma opened it, and a sweet melody filled the room. Mark, with a playful grin, extended his hand. "May I have this dance?" Emma hesitated, her knees feeling unsteady. "I can barely stand anymore," she admitted with a laugh. "I'll hold you," Mark assured her, his voice warm and inviting. Together, they swayed in the small room, the music wrapping around them like a gentle embrace. Their steps were slow, but the feelings they shared were profound and indescribable. As their relationship blossomed, the neighbors began to notice. Whispers circulated, "Who was this young man? Why did he visit Emma every day?" Curiosity turned to speculation, and soon the gossip began to spread. Emma could feel the weight of their stares, but she also felt the thrill of something new and beautiful unfolding in her life. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Emma found herself standing outside her apartment building, her heart racing. She had just bumped into Mrs. Thompson, an elderly neighbor, who eyed her with a mix of curiosity and concern. "Who's that young man you've been spending time with?" "Your grandson?" Mrs. Thompson asked, her voice laced with skepticism. Emma paused, her mind racing. For the first time, she felt a surge of confidence as she replied, "No, he's a surprise in my life." When she returned home, her hands trembled slightly. She couldn't wait to share the news with Mark, but she sensed he might not take it well. When she finally told him, his expression shifted from surprise to frustration. "People talk because they have nothing exciting in their lives. Ours is real," he said, determination in his voice. That day, they made a pact, they would no longer hide their relationship. Mark began to tell his friends about Emma, some were shocked, others teased him. But he brushed off their comments with a smile, declaring, "My happiness doesn't fit anyone's mold." Emma, inspired by his confidence, started to embrace change herself. She began wearing lipstick, dyed her hair a vibrant shade, and updated her wardrobe with colorful outfits. Fresh flowers adorned her home, brightening the space and her spirit. One afternoon, they took a selfie together, capturing a moment of joy. Emma framed the picture and placed it on her bedside table. One evening, as they sat on her balcony watching the sunset, Mark turned to her and asked, "Do you love me?" Emma gazed into the distance, contemplating the question. "Love feels different at this age," she replied thoughtfully. "But yes, I do love you." Mark's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "If my mom knew, she would be so happy." "Does she know?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "She knows, and she respects you more than you realize," Emma reassured him. That night, for the first time, Mark stayed over at her place. They sat together on the couch, wrapped in a cozy blanket. The silence was comfortable, filled with unspoken words. In the middle of the night, Emma woke up to get a glass of water and glanced at Mark, who was sleeping peacefully, a serene expression on his face. She approached him, adjusting the blanket around his shoulders, and gently brushed her fingers against his forehead. In that moment, she whispered to herself, "If this is the last gift life gives me, I accept it." The next morning, they shared breakfast, laughter filling the air, but life had other plans. As summer faded into autumn, the first cool breeze swept through the city. The leaves turned golden, falling gently to the ground, yet Emma's heart remained vibrant, blooming with the memories of her time with Mark. Each day felt like a miracle, quiet, elegant, and profound. They had established a routine. Some days Mark would take time off from work, and other days he'd arrive late, but each time he came home, he brought a touch of spring to Emma's face. She had started to enjoy looking in the mirror, putting clips in her hair, and waking up early. Music filled the apartment, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air. Two people from different walks of life shared the same table, breaking bread together. But just when everything seemed perfect, life found a way to test their happiness. One morning, Mark didn't show up. Noon passed, then evening, and still no sign of him. Emma waited, her heart sinking as she peered out the window like an old woman longing for a lost love. The next morning came, and he was still absent. He didn't have a phone, nor did she know his address. Their love had been so pure and honest that they hadn't felt the need for those things. By the third day, unease settled in Emma's chest. Her knees ached, and her heart felt heavy. It wasn't just the waiting that hurt, it was the unsettling feeling that something was wrong. On the fourth day, a knock echoed through her apartment. But it wasn't Mark. A young woman wearing a headscarf stood at the door, holding a small note. "Excuse me, are you Emma?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Yes, I am," Emma replied, her heart racing. "I'm Mark's cousin." "I have a note for you," she said, extending the envelope with shaky hands. Emma's fingers quivered as she opened it, recognizing Mark's handwriting immediately. "Emma, as I write this, words are choking me. There's something I didn't tell you. My mom has fallen ill again, but this time it's serious. I need to go to my aunt's village. There's no phone signal there. I might not be able to see you for a while. But know that." The note trailed off, leaving Emma with an overwhelming sense of dread. The warmth of their shared moments felt distant, and the uncertainty loomed like a shadow over her heart. Emma woke up every morning thinking of Mark. "And if this letter reached you, know that you are still in my heart. Hold on, because I will return. I love you." The note slipped from Emma's fingers as she collapsed onto the couch. No tears fell from her eyes, but inside, she felt as if everything was crumbling. At her age, waiting for someone again felt like an impossible task, yet Mark had not returned. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Emma continued to gaze out the window, her heart heavy with longing. Neighbors began to whisper. Where did that young man go? How long could an old woman like her wait? But Emma remained silent. Hope resides in the heart, and love knows how to wait. That winter was harsh. Emma fell ill. When the doctor visited, he assumed she lived alone. Little did he know, her heart still belonged to Mark. One night, as her fever rose, she dreamt of him. Mark was there, holding her hand. You promised, I will return, she whispered. I have returned, he replied. Is it real? You are in my heart, and that is enough. When she woke, tears streamed down her face. At the edge of her blanket lay an old handkerchief, delicately embroidered at the edges. It was the one Mark's mother had given her, and she still kept it close. Days passed, and then one spring morning, the doorbell rang again. Emma struggled to the door, using her cane for support. She opened it slowly, and there stood Mark, but he looked different. His eyes were weary, his hair long and unkempt, and a scruffy beard adorned his face. Yet his smile was still the same. How many months has it been? Emma asked, her voice trembling. 12, Mark replied, lowering his head. But I didn't spend a single day away from you. My mother passed away. I waited for her to turn 40. Then I came straight here. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. Instead, she stepped closer and took Mark's hand. Welcome back, she said softly. I made it back. You did. From that day forward, everything changed. Mark stayed by Emma's side. He helped with shopping, cooked meals, and brewed tea. They began to weave their lives together again. One summer morning, while walking along the beach, Mark stopped. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside was a single ring. "Will you marry me?" Emma's eyes widened. "Mark, I'm 80 years old, and I love you. Your age doesn't matter to me." Let them laugh. What have I not lived until now? Love. That day, Emma accepted. They had a quiet wedding with just a few friends and neighbors. But their small living room was filled with flowers, and Emma wore a white dress like a bride. Mark held her hand with tears in his eyes as they signed the papers. Afterward, Emma whispered, "My heart still beats your name, and mine does too." As the years passed, Emma's health began to decline. She struggled to walk, and her sleep was short. But every morning, Mark sat at the edge of her bed, holding her hand and looking at her with love. One day, Emma rested her head on Mark's shoulder. "This life gave me you. I want nothing else." When autumn arrived, Emma closed her eyes one morning, forever. Her funeral was simple. Mark stood alone at her grave, but then he took out that old handkerchief from his jacket. He placed it on Emma's grave, the letter E still visible on it. Years later, in a park, an elderly man sat on a bench, sipping tea from an empty cup beside him. A passing child curiously asked, "Sir, why do you have an empty cup?" "For the woman next to me. She loved tea the most." And that was their story. The age difference, time, society, none of it mattered. Because love was the meeting of two souls, and those two souls were forever united in a glance, a touch, and the warmth of shared tea. Subscribe to the channel,